So I'm just driving to work right now, and all of a sudden I start thinking, you know, it's really worth marveling at the fact that I'm in a fucking steamy mood right now because honestly, I'm thinking about, the last 4 years have been a quite a roller coaster ride for everyone watching the state of trans politics and transgender culture and the way that it's been perceived and attacked and celebrated and just sort of spread, I suppose, all over the place now. Uh, just even from like 2001, like it's just absolutely crazy how much it's everywhere now. And obviously, it's probably going to be a pretty rough 4 years. Um, the Republicans seem hell bent on getting, ringing, sort of like voting blocks who really hate the idea of like the gender critical blocks, I guess. And I think it's really worth discussing what kind of path, I guess, to go down for resisting the public image of trans people as predators, as groomers, as fetishists. And I think, honestly, you should accept the fact that there are groomers and pedophiles and fetishists in the trans community, and that some of them are trans. I mean, they may not be like medically trans or true trans or whatever, but the average public will almost certainly never tell the difference between those two groups of people. And there's no real point in trying to say, oh, there's some group of trans people who are heckin' wholesome and they're like this other group who are fetishists. It's just not going to work in the public imagination.
So, it's going to be a rough 4 years, right? And I think it's going to be a rough 4 years for everybody, honestly. It will get better in some ways, but it will definitely get worse in a lot of ways. And honestly, along with kind of the entire movement of progressivism, the one major group I'd say who's the most in panic right now is probably the transsexuals. And the transsexuals are, at this point, a very wide group of people. It's a big tent, right? And in the end, something needs to be done differently. And everyone thinks they know the answer. In this big tent of transgenderism, there is, I guess you could say, really three main factions. And all three factions seem to dislike each other. And we have a little bit of a circular firing squad going on right now. And that's really not going to work anymore. But that's probably what we're going to have, honestly, is a circular firing squad. Tensions are going to get worse. People are not going to listen to each other. And a lot of internal conflicts in the trans community, I suppose, are just going to sort of get out there. But anyway, I guess to sort of back up, the three really big groups that I'm talking about here is, number one, go by a lot of names. You could say AGP, sissies, fetishists, just sort of generally the people who like pornography, they like sexuality, and they transition based off of some sort of sexual desire. And then the second group is the trans medicalists. They call themselves true trans. They think that it should be sorely defined, essentially, as a medical issue. And the third group of people, I guess, are sort of the tag-alongs. They're the people who don't have too much stake in this, honestly, but who like to talk about it a lot. And honestly, to me, the first thing I see with those three groups of people is a match made in heaven for a social group, honestly, if you're trying to get some sort of legal representation or political rights. And the fact that knowledge of these people has become so widespread, and by these people I mean transgender people in general, there's something to work with there. But until the internal divisions are worked out, I don't see it.
Now, I should preface this by saying I do kind of sympathize with like the sissies and the AGP because, okay. If you have no idea what I'm talking about here, let me take a step back. So, trans women, which I think most people know of by now, they've become sort of a spectacle in the court of public opinion. But anyway, they actually have several subgroups of trans women now, several different flavors, I suppose, and they're all kind of at war with one another, and that's not in the public consciousness yet, but it certainly will be over the next 4 years, which I guess is sort of the point of this video. I think that shouldn't be the case, but possibly it just needs to happen, you know. And honestly, the dynamics of the trans community between, I guess, the fetishists and the trans medicalists, and then sort of like the non-binary sort of I guess passengers to the trans movement. There's a lot of you know, conflict there that is I guess bound to happen at the worst possible time right now over the next 4 years, but we're just going to see it. So honestly, I would say look forward to that. But anyway, so the first group that I want to talk about is the AGPs. I'm going to call them the sissies. They're not necessarily sissies, all of them, but a lot of them are. And sissy hypnopornography, or SHP from here on out, is a specific flavor of pornography that mostly appeals to young men who essentially have some sort of problem with their masculinity. And a very large part of it is the fact that you are so unmasculine, you as in the viewer of the pornography, the consumer of the pornography, if you will, are so unmasculine that you have to become a woman in order to gain any sort of sexual pleasure. Because as a man, you basically can't win. And I really think there's a lot of extremely fascinating stuff to talk about here. There is a couple videos on YouTube talking about these people. I think they're pretty shallow. This is going to be a pretty shallow video as well. But there's just there's a sort of online microcosm, sort of, I guess, a sort of a catalyst in this pornography that I feel like you can really look at all social issues in the United States through. There's a massive emphasis on class, on race, and especially on gender. And transsexualism is essentially the whole appeal of the fetish, of the pornography itself. And the two really fascinating things and unique things about this type of pornography is that, one, it actually convinces people not only to change their mental state in real life, which I'm sure we all know people who have been affected by pornography addiction and whatnot, but it affects people in such a way where they're convinced to change their actual bodies, to change the way they present. And there's some pretty famous examples of this. I'll get into those later. But I think that is a really big deal, honestly, if you're going to change your body over a pornography addiction. But I also want to put a little pauser here, saying that a porn addiction that makes you change your body, and that guy almost crashed into me, and transsexualism, or being transgender, they're not the same thing. And we will address that later. They're often conflated, but very different, okay? The second thing that's really fascinating about this specific flavor of pornography is there is a huge multi-thousand member community that's active about quitting this fetish. Not just about pornography in general, but quitting specifically sissy and sissy hypno porn. And when I first ran into these people, specifically it was a YouTuber named TG and Sissy Recovery, I knew I had to get a little bit of exposure to this sort of idea. It's, I don't know, it seems like it's becoming more popular. And the fact that it's so intrinsically linked with transsexualism already in the public consciousness, despite the fact that the vast majority of people could not tell you what what sissy hypnoporn is or anything like that. You'll definitely hear from a lot of conservatives, or I will, and not even just conservatives, just the general public, that there is some sort of there's something sexually wrong, essentially, with people who want to transition their gender. And I think it is worth pointing out that there are people like that, but that they operate at a separate place in the sort of transsexual political firing squad. So, without further ado, let's look at some details. And what's sort of fascinating about this is that a lot of them recognize that it's just a fetish, or that it's a mental illness or something like that. In fact, there's a huge community right now that I think is worth really going into, that I'm going to go into in a second, called the Transgender and Sissy Recovery. It's a subreddit, as well as kind of sparse. And by the way, I do think it's crazy that the furries get so much shit all the time when they are literally just doing their own thing, and they have they just like to pretend to be animals. Like, they don't know animals are involved. Like, animals aren't actually being hurt, and they're actually very sensitive to animals most of the time. And they're roundly mocked, while these much worse fetishes that, basically say that power imbalances and gender chaos and rape and racial fetishization are okay. They're given a free pass. It makes no sense at all, honestly. The furries are okay. What's wrong with furries? I don't know why everyone gets so mad about furries. Anyway, if we're gonna get forward, we need to forget about the furries. I'm sorry. So the TG and Sissy Recovery people are essentially people who were addicted to porn and treat these communities that talk about people who used to watch excessive amounts of sissy hypnoporn, which is essentially it's a type of pornography that's very degrading, focused heavily on power structures and gender and race and stuff like that. Lots of fetishizing of black men, for example, is actually pretty disgusting, honestly. I wouldn't recommend looking at it, but it's definitely out there, and there are a lot of people who are really into it. It's kind of a unique community in that way. But I guess what really does make it unique is the fact that there's so many people who are addicted to it, and they treat communities that they're alcoholics or something, or they're drug users. They're so addicted that they need to get into essentially they need to get help, and they need to have go through a 12-step program, which is just kind of, and it's separate from porn addiction, because it's not even just porn addiction. It's specifically porn involving transgender women and sissies, and this there's lots of captions that are sort of degrading and mess with your mental state. I don't know. I guess if you look at them, they seem pretty silly to me. It's lots of you'll never please a woman, so you should just get buck broken by Tyrone or something. And yeah, I guess one of the really fascinating things about the fetish is the fact that you essentially are willingly partaking in it, which is, pretty typical for fetishes, of course, but it's you keep going back to it, and you cannot stop. And now it's fascinating, honestly, to compare this with drug addiction, because a lot of people really do have problems with pornography. And I've had my own problems with pornography, certainly. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Hey, wait, let me. It's actually illegal to turn this on. But I will not lie to you. I have had my own experiences with pornography. I have certainly watched a good deal of it. I started watching pornography probably when I was about 13 years old, as is the case, I believe, with many people my age. And I have since forsaken forsaken pornography. I don't think it's a good thing. If you're struggling with pornography addiction or anything like that, you should probably steer clear of this sissy stuff. I don't know, just a suggestion, I guess. It doesn't seem very good for the people who partake in it. But yeah, I mean, I guess just a little bit of backstory. I found out about pornography through gaming, because I would play video games all the time, and it was essentially through communities in gaming, specifically around art, where it was like there would be art for a video game. You know, it's kind of ridiculous now, but like I remember one of the first things I ever jerked off to was like art for a Dungeons and Dragons like playthrough campaign or something like that. Someone had made like a bunch of artistic figurines that looked very lifelike, and I was like 13 or something like that, and you know, you feel the sexual urges, you know. And it wasn't really until like years and years later, like 5 years later, and I had it pretty bad, I would say, when I was like 17, that I had almost a sort of religious experience, I would describe it, where I was like, this is like just so obviously bad for me, like looking at all this shit. And it may have involved being on drugs, I may have been on psychedelics, and I may have looked at some porn, and I may have just thought, you know, what the fuck is this? Like, this is like kind of disgusting to watch this like pretty intimate, you know, act on screen as like this consumable little product. So I don't know, I just don't really think that there's anything to be gained by looking at it. You know, and I feel like that's really kind of the best place to start this story, is with video games, and specifically a video gamer, and a video gamer who probably doesn't have a lot in common with traditional masculinity, or the way that basically any man would have been raised for the majority of history, I suppose. And I guess it's tied up really in passivity. And I feel like video games are kind of the most passive pastime that you can partake in, if you want a little bit of alliteration right there. But not only is there sort of this inherent passivity and almost feminine nature to computers and gaming and whatnot, I also think that just kind of by its very nature, when you grow up interacting with the screen like it's your friend, like it's a source of entertainment, and not just a source of entertainment, but a source of joy, I guess, like a source of almost intimacy. That's really where you can fall directly into the porn as a lifestyle kind of thing. And I've definitely seen it happen to people I know. In an alternate history, I'm sure it could have happened to me. Porn addiction. I don't know. It's something that's striking to me is just how it didn't feel harmless. Whenever I would jerk off, it felt like I was doing something wrong, which is what, you know, sort of brought about, you know, part of the pleasure in jerking off and just doing it all the time. But there was also just sort of the fundamental assumption that nothing bad was really going to happen, because I was never told about porn at all. I was never warned about porn. Most people weren't, you know, other than just sort of the typical like, you know, go outside and like enjoy your life and stuff like that. But there is something that you really need to know when you engage with a screen and you're a kid, which is that the screen will just shoot back essentially whatever you want. You're not being tested. You're not being improved or even really read in any way by the screen. You're just sort of being consumed, and you just sort of become a product of a weird synthesis between yourself and technology, and not in a good way at all. And once you get there, identity becomes a really difficult thing.
Now, what I believe that the transsexuals have got to do is they've got to recognize that it is, in fact, a big tent political party, but that is not a big tent actual identity. Transgenderism or trans people in general don't really exist. There is a medical condition, there is a fetish, and there's a social movement. And the three things sometimes are interlinked, but most of the time are honestly not super interlinked.
So, I guess one of the main points that I really need to get across here to you, audience, is that there exists sort of a realm of public opinion, and it's kind of like the court of St. James, I suppose. And once you start making appearances there with your buddies, you know, you're always going to be tied to your buddies, and you've always got to defend them, even if they're doing things that are pretty whack. And, you know, call out your buddies all you want in private, but you have to present a united front here. You cannot just say that it's like, it's all okay, you know, because it's not all okay.
And so, I mean, really, I guess you can break down what I think we need to do into three simple words that start with D. So like a green capped friend of mine, basically, number one, define. We really need to actually define transsexual. We need to define AGP. We need to define Sissy. And honestly, the internal conflicts of these groups requires a much longer, in-depth dive that nobody has done at all. But I'm not really sure I'm the person to do that. But anyway, back to define. Moreover than just defining these labels, we really need to get down to exactly what legally and politically we want to achieve for trans people. If you care at all about trans people or their future, having big abstract, you know, like no trans person will be safe until communism or something like that, it's not very helpful in the short term, I suppose, and it's not very helpful for even achieving communism if that's your goal, which is you know, more power to you, I suppose. But anyway, really, that's what I want to see more of, is see an actual, genuine, this is what we want, instead of recognition or anything like that. Second off, I think that differentiating the different types of trans people, but still including them, is very important. You have to do both at the same time. The sort of, I guess, Brianna Wu version of trans politics, where there are some people who are heckin' wholesome trannies, and there are some people who are just fetishists who are out to rape women or whatever. It's just not gonna fly with the general public. No amount of advocacy or anything like that is going to change people's mind in regards to when they see AGPs, when they see sissies, who are people who are incredibly addicted to pornography, of course. They are not going to just say, oh, that's different from a trans person, that's just a fetishist. No, they're gonna say, oh, I guess that's a trans person, because honestly, people don't have time to fucking map out their own gender, you know, sexuality, all of that stuff. Most people are just trying to put food on the table, you know? So defining things in a very, very specific way, and then differentiating everybody, but saying, yeah, we're all different. That's true. We should acknowledge that we have differences, but we're all generally in it for the same thing. And if you're going to take part in sexualizing, say, trans people, then, I mean, honestly, why not pay it back and help them gain a little bit of recognition? That makes sense to me personally, but I know that doesn't make sense to a lot of people. And thirdly, really, defend. I think we're really going to have to defend, essentially, existing, I suppose. I don't like the whole trans genocide narrative. I think it's pretty stupid, but at the same time, we need to defend the fact that there are some people, including minors, who want to transition, and they have that right if their parents agree and they're, of sound mind and body. It's a medical thing. Minors can go through medical things, and we should defend that. Look at that. We should definitely defend that, but we should not attack people who have different opinions, I suppose. So just make sure that you're always looking out for the people around you, even if they don't believe what you believe. Do not do, I guess, pick me is so loaded of a term, I really don't like it, but that's sort of, I guess, the colloquial term now of just saying, those people are bad, but I'm good. It's just not going to fly anymore.